So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the shading of the eye. Now before we actually start the shading, we first need to observe something called the catch light. Now the catch light is a little reflection of light that shines off of your partner's eyes. The reason the catch light is there is that eyes are really shiny, and so they always reflect a little bit of light. Now the catch light is going to be in a different spot depending on what angle the light is hitting your partner's eyes, but it's usually a shape kind of like this. There may be a couple different spots at different points in the eye. So go ahead and observe where the catch light is and make sure you draw it in big enough. I always exaggerate it just a tiny bit because you'll find that your tendency will be to draw it just a little bit too small. So once you have the catch light in, then we'll go ahead and we'll shade in the pupils. I'm going to use my 6B pencil to do that because you'll notice that the pupils are always pure black. I'm not pushing too hard, I'm not crushing the tooth of the paper, but I am shading it in nice and dark. So I got my pupils shaded pure black. Next I'm going to shade in my iris, and for me, I noticed that the outer edge of my iris is a little bit darker. So I'm drawing in that outer edge a little darker. Not super dark, and yours might not be darker, so make sure you observe on your partner, is the outer edge darker or not. And then my eyes are sort of medium light, and I noticed that they're a little bit darker at the top, and that's because the eyelid casts a little bit of a shadow onto the top of the iris, and then they fade a little bit lighter as they get down towards the bottom. Now your partner's iris might be really, really dark. They might be a lot darker than mine. So if it's a lot darker than mine, go ahead and shade it in darker. If they're really light, go ahead and shade it in lighter. And then a detail that I usually like to add, especially if your partner's irises are kind of light, is that usually you see these little lines with radial symmetry, kind of like a sun, like the rays of a sun. They come straight out from the center of the pupil. You may or may not be able to see those on your partner. So check it out, see if you're able to see those radial symmetry lines. And if you do, go ahead and draw those in now. Now I talked about how the eyelid casts a little bit of a shadow onto the iris. It also casts a little bit of a shadow onto the top of the eyeball along the top edge. So I'm going to add a little bit of that shadow along the top edge of my eyeball, very, very subtly. And then also because the eyeball is round, there's usually a little bit of shading along the outer corners of it. Very, very, very subtle. But I'm getting that shading in now. And then there's also going to be some shading above the eyelid. I just darkened my eyelid a little bit because for me that crease is pretty dark. And then I'm adding a little bit of this shading that I see above the eyelid. And I also noticed that there's a little bit of shading below that crease, and that really makes the crease look like it has volume. So I'm adding in that shading right now. I'm going to use my lightest pencil, which for me is a 4H, to kind of blend it upward, make that shading get a little lighter as it comes up. And this should be subtle. All this shading should be very subtle. Next, I'm going to draw in part of the eye that a lot of people don't notice, and that is the lower eyelid, which is also called the waterline. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can really see that. And this is a little extra edge right across the bottom of the eye. And you'll notice, you can see this little bit of the inside of the eyelid. So I'm just adding in this very thin light line to create this little bottom eyelid right there. After I get that in, I'm ready to start the eyelashes. So depending on your partner's ethnicity, the eyelashes might have a different shape. And I'm actually going to show you some different shapes of eyelashes over here on the side. So let's say here's my eye, here's my tear duct, here's my iris, and here's another one. We'll draw another one down here. So there's my eyelids. Your partner might have eyelashes that really curve up, right? So their eyelashes might kind of start coming out like this, and all of them have a kind of a curve up. and then as they come to the other side, they come out to the other direction. I think that's the way that we most commonly learn how to draw eyelashes. But your eyelashes on your partner might actually have a curve down. They still have a curve to them. So notice that each one I'm drawing a curve. Notice that on this side the curve is coming out towards the outer corner, and on this side the curve is still going out towards the outer corner, and then in the middle they kind of become more straight. Okay, so notice, do your partner's eyelashes curve more up or do they curve more down? My eyelashes curve more up, so I'm going to get those in over here. And my eyelashes are pretty long, so I'm drawing them in pretty long, but your partner's might be a lot shorter. And you'll notice I'm using these kind of quick pencil movements. That helps me really have the ends of my eyelashes become sort of thin. And then the other thing about eyelashes is they tend to sort of clump together. I'll show you over here what I mean. They tend to have groups of maybe like 3 or 4, even just 2 eyelashes that come together at the tips. So I'm going to come back over here and add some eyelashes to create little clumps. I find that looks more realistic than having them all perfectly evenly spaced. So I'm creating little clumps that come together to create points kind of at the end. And then I have pretty dark eyelashes, so I'm going to go in and like darken these up. And I always like to kind of darken and thicken the base of the eyelashes also, where they connect to the eyelid, or the top edge of the eye rather. So I'm darkening mine up. If your person has very light eyelashes, you probably don't need to darken them up, but mine are very dark. So there are my top eyelashes. I'll zoom in so we can get a closer view. And then people also have bottom eyelashes, but they tend to be much shorter and usually a little bit lighter than the top ones. They still come out at a little bit of the curve. They're still sort of in clumps, so you can see I'm drawing them in little clumps of like 3 or 2 or 4. So now I have my bottom eyelashes just coming off of the bottom edge of my waterline or my bottom eyelid. And once you finish that, you have completed the eye. Next, we'll move on to the eyebrow.